Hello and welcome to Post Sports Live. I'm Gene Wang, and we saw some outstanding quarterback play in both the NFL playoffs and the College Football National Championship game. I'm just a game manager, and I'm going to lean heavily on this group of great skill players right here as we bring you the sports stories that are most important to you in the DMV and nationally as well. In the first chair, Mr. Fantasy Stats himself, Neil Greenberg. In the middle seat, from the early lead, Marissa Payne. And to my left, columnist and the original sports blog, Dan Steinberg. I'm going to ask you three to sit tight for just a minute while we give our viewers a rundown of talking points, starting with the Washington Redskins and their new general manager. What's next there? Then we look at the Final Four in the NFL playoffs. Then we'll come back to the DMV and look at the Wizards and the Washington Capitals. And we'll wrap it up with what is next for the two teams that competed in the final college football game of the season. But first, off the top, the Redskins announced last week that Scot McCloughan is their new GM. We know this team has a lot of stuff to do in the offseason. They'll have to upgrade at a lot of positions. They also have to hire a new defensive coordinator. So with that in mind, Dan Steinberg, I'll start with you. What should be the new general manager's first order of business?
Well, he's already said he's not going to be in the coaching, hiring business. So I think that the defensive coordinator job, while he might have some input, is not going to be the top thing on his plate. I mean, to me, there's two big questions, which would be what are they going to do with the first draft pick and what are they going to do with the quarterback position? I mean, to me, I would rather have this guy worry about the draft pick. That is where he has shown his expertise. That's why he was hired. And so to me, he talked so much about offensive linemen. He talked about defensive linemen. He talked about how NFC East football games, at least traditionally, have involved the running game.
Yeah.
And I think that his job is to beef up the lines on both sides of the line of scrimmage, the offensive line and the defensive line. Maybe trade down in the draft, maybe find guys in the later rounds that the Redskins haven't done lately. But to me, if he can rebuild the lines, that would be number one on his list.
You know, where do you what should be his first priority as the new GM?
I agree. You got to start with the offensive line. Doesn't really matter who you have a quarterback back there. If they're not being protected, they're not going to be productive. So, and that's what we saw how Dallas has gotten so successful.
Yeah.
I mean, they have made a conscious effort to build through the offensive line in the draft. Redskins would be better served going that route as well. But you can't ignore the secondary. I mean, they have a ton of holes there as well, especially safety. You know, we saw some cornerback issues with David Amerson and so there's just tons of holes. But again, championship teams are always built in the trenches. Got to start with the offensive line.
Yeah. Marissa, let me ask you this, though. You look at the four teams that are still in the playoffs. You can certainly say three of them have franchise quarterbacks, and Russell Wilson is on his way to becoming that. Is that the most important part for the Redskins and Scott, or should it be other positions that they need to address?
You know, he has said, I believe he said that he's going to, not totally abandon RG3 at this point in time. So it seems to me that he wouldn't waste a top pick on a quarterback. But he also said he would need to work on that position. And as you've just said, you can't really go about being a winning team without a franchise quarterback that you can rely on. And right now we don't have that. So it is, well, I agree he has to address, the O-line, everything like that. But he does need to address the quarterback situation as well. How he's going to do that is the big question.
Well, Dan, are we looking at, a 2-3 year rebuilding process? I mean, what's like a kind of
it's
a
kind
forecast?
of an interesting question because that's something that the Redskins have never done under Dan Snyder. They haven't done a 1 year rebuilding project. It's always trying to fix things right
now,
away.
Yeah.
And, it's worked like 3 times briefly, but for the most part it hasn't worked. Will fans have patience? Fans right now say, hey, let's tear everything down, let's build from the foundation. That's what fans are saying now. If they go 5-11 and 6-10 the next 2 years, are fans still saying, oh yeah, we got patience, let's take 4 years? I don't know. Is Dan Snyder saying that? I don't know. Is Jay Gruden going to survive a 4 or 5, 6 win season a couple years in a row? I don't know. But I think that based on what he did in San Francisco, and that's what good teams do. They take a while to get there, and then they have a 5, 6, 7 year window of competing, and that's certainly seems preferable to floundering around. But I don't know if people will have patience when it actually comes down to it.
You can't build an offensive line in one season. We know that.
Right.
Dallas took a while. But Marissa, let me ask you: is the hiring of McCloughan at least a sign that the Redskins may be starting to get things right and moving in the right direction?
This is the cycle of hope. We've had so many, so there's so many ups and downs. It's like you hate to say, yes, definitely, this is a new start because you don't want to be disappointed again. At the same time, you don't want to be, negative Nancy, being like, it's all shot to hell and we should just give up. And
Negative Neil, I think.
Right. Appreciate you censoring that.
Neil, I'll ask you this: Do you believe, though, given the history of Dan Snyder and the front office, that there'll be no meddling and that this guy will have complete control of player personnel?
Oh, no way. But he does have the he does have the track record at least coming in to say, I've done this with 2 organizations now. So you'd have to think he probably have a lot more latitude than we've seen in the past. And it was definitely a sign that the organization realized they were going in the wrong direction. But I agree with Dan. I don't think that they have the patience to make this work, because it takes more than one draft pick, right? I mean, they're going to have to stockpile draft picks. They're going to have to be patient. And those are 2 strengths that this organization does not have.
Well,
and even last year with the Deshaun Jackson thing, is that the kind of move? That's a Dan Snyder move. Is that a Scot McCloughan move? I don't know.
Yeah. Now we're moving to teams that are still actually playing on the field, and we have 2 games left to determine who plays in the Super Bowl. We got the Packers and Seahawks, which I'm very much looking forward to, and the Colts and Patriots. Neil, I'll start with you. Who do you got out of those teams?
Sticking with the Seahawks, there's very few holes in their game. We talked about it a little bit before the show.
Yeah.
Perhaps they don't have a big-time wide receiver, but their passing game is solid.
Yeah.
They can run the ball. They can stop the run.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, their secondary with Richard Sherman is clearly an asset.
And Cam Chancellor, who may be playing the best football right now.
Without a doubt, steals people's souls or some Mortal Kombat thing. And, especially, this is truly a team that's clicking on all cylinders. I don't know how you stop them at this point. You stop one part of their game, they still have 3 others that can beat you. So I'm sticking with Seattle.
Marissa, who do you like among those final 4 teams?
I agree with Neil, actually.
Mark it down. Historic moment.
Right. Make sure you archive this.
Yeah, we will.
The Seahawks really have proven themselves to be unbeatable at this point. Although at the same time, Andrew Luck comes in with that neck beard, that lucky neck beard.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to work pretty well for him, right?
It's true.
Dan, do you have a favorite?
I mean, it would be hard to go against Seattle. I think the team that has the best chance to beat them, to me, is pretty clearly the Patriots, which also seems obvious, but they have much better health. I mean, Tom Brady's healthy and Aaron Rodgers isn't. That's what it comes down to me, in terms of who has a better chance to beat them. And, Belichick maybe comes up with a 3-man offensive line or whatever, 1-man offensive line, and throws Seattle off.
Well, we saw what Seattle did to another great quarterback, Peyton Manning. We saw what the Giants did to Tom Brady to win those Super Bowls. Is that a kind of scenario you can see unfolding if they end up meeting the Super Bowl?
Yeah, but it's not like Tom Brady was left helpless by the Giants. I mean, those were 2 competitive games.
Yeah,
it wasn't what happened with Payne. I think the Patriots, like when you say they're unbeatable, I think the Patriots could beat the Seahawks. And usually, like we've talked about over the past couple of weeks, usually what we think is going to happen in the NFL postseason doesn't.
But would they have to do it through trickeration and the trick plays that they pull?
I mean, they ran 7 running plays last week, and they managed to win a playoff game through that. I think they have interesting ways to win games. I think the Patriots could do it.
Well, don't you, Neil? Do you think the Packers at least are built a little bit to compete in this time of the year, because now they can run the ball? They have Eddie Lacy. They don't have to necessarily rely on Aaron Rodgers. I know the Seahawks have a stout run defense, but they're going to try to run the ball.
Right, but Aaron Rodgers being hurt takes away the deep part of the field, so they're really left with Devontae Adams catching those 9-yard passes and below. I mean, the Seahawks are deep enough that they can stop something like that, and then you're really limiting it to Eddie Lacy, like you said. But the Seattle has the best or top 3 run defense in the league, so it's not like you can even exploit them that way. It's going to be very difficult, and not having 100% Aaron Rodgers, I think, makes it not impossible, but I think it's even more in favor of the Seahawks.
There were times last week where it seemed like obviously Rodgers would run if he were healthy. Because, I mean, he's a quick dude, and he wasn't.
Well, remember Dallas went in there and loaded up on DeMarco Murray, and they beat Seattle. That's how you do it. I mean, you gotta kind of wear him down. I think I know it's easier said than done.
You haven't given your pick yet.
My pick is the Packers. I mean, I'm going with Aaron Rodgers. I do think right now among the 4, he's the best quarterback going, even though he's a little dinged up. If they can give him any kind of time.
One leg.
I know that running game, though, changes things. Before he didn't have a running game. Now Eddie Lacy's starting to go. But I know it's a long shot, but that's why we watch the playoffs, right? Let's come back local now and look at the Washington Wizards, who recently have gotten blown out by Atlanta Hawks on the road, but scored a pretty impressive win against the Chicago Bulls. So, Marissa, I'll start with you. Where do you rank them now among the top 4 seeds in the East?
I don't like putting numbers on things. To be honest, I know this is why Neil doesn't like dealing with me. But well, there are those 2, I think, disc jockeys in Atlanta who said, if the Hawks end up number 1, we're going to go to jail or something like that. I'm not trying to do anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think they have the ability to be on the top. I think it's going to depend a lot on what happens tonight and what happens tomorrow, especially tomorrow when they're playing the Bulls again. They've had 1 big loss, 1 big win, so we'll see what happens. I am hoping they win, obviously, but we'll see.
Well, Dan, where do you see them among the top 4?
I say third.
Third behind Atlanta and Toronto?
Yeah, behind Atlanta and Toronto. I think that I mean, I watched all of that Chicago game. Obviously, it might be a very different story when they play in Chicago, but it seemed to me like the Wizards were a more talented team and just a better team than Chicago in that last game. I know they lost at home to them previously, but right now, if you ask me right now, I mean, Toronto had a weird loss to Detroit, but the Wizards have not looked competitive against Toronto or against Atlanta. But they, to me, and what they did to a kind of different Bulls team, but still we saw them handle the Bulls last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'll say they're third right now.
What number do you have them at, Neil?
I'm at fourth behind Chicago. Wizards have been a tough team to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, they've showed flashes that they're really good and contend, but they've never really showed that they're a true title contender. They show that they're probably an Eastern Conference contender, but they haven't showed they're a title contender. I think we actually talked about that last time I was on the show.
Yeah.
So I have them as a fourth, but a distant fourth behind Toronto and Atlanta. I think that's the class of the East right now.
Yeah, I think we all agree that they're not going to be a contender for the NBA title, but
Yeah, we were talking about that last week. I still haven't ruled out Cleveland from surpassing them. I know they're a complete tire fire right now, but I just am not willing. They just have so many talented players that I'm not willing
but they have no talented bench. I think that's what's going to keep Cleveland ultimately in some trouble.
Well, but Marissa, do you not think there's kind of a room for growth for the Wizards, considering Martell Webster, their best three-point shooter, is just coming back? He's starting to get his legs under him. They can get better down the stretch. Do you not think?
I 100% think that. I think I'm like the most optimistic person on this panel right now about the Wizards.
To me, it's more likely that they would get worse than they would get better, honestly, because of.
I was about to say, I think there's more of a downside.
Because of that.
So you are the most optimistic on the panel,
guess so.
clearly. But why do you say
Paul
that,
Pierce
Jay?
is not getting any younger between now and
No,
May,
sure.
and Nene is not getting any healthier. I mean, he's been remarkably healthy for him so far. It just feels like all of the guys. Beal has been injury prone over the course of his career. But this year everyone's been swell.
Yeah, but now that Webster's coming back, isn't the idea that Pierce is
Webster,
No, I'm not saying, but he's going to at least spell Paul Pierce for. I mean, Paul Pierce is not going to have to play those extended minutes. Now they have another guy with Otto Porter that can play that position.
It doesn't hurt. I just feel like if you're talking about do they have more upside between now and the next 3 months or downside, it seems to me like they have more downside.
Why do you think they have more downside, Neil?
Because it's just the way that this team is built and just the way that they've been playing. They haven't been playing at a high enough level to say, you know what, they're closer to being this really great team than this really good team in the East. So I do think that there's a little bit of room. I'm not saying that they're going to be Cleveland or the Knicks, but I'm saying they're not going to be, like Atlanta or Toronto.
Okay, still saying that they're the third or fourth team in the East is
right,
great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's awesome.
Well, speaking of teams that are playing at a high level, the Washington Capitals are doing just that. They have a point in 17 of the last 18 games, 6 straight wins at home, just one game through halfway point of the regular season. Neil, what have they been doing to go on this roll?
Well, Holtby's been playing out of his mind. I mean, they're getting great goaltending. I mean, he's been absolutely stellar. I think that he's probably, I don't want to say he's the unsung hero, but he's been playing great. And they've been getting a lot of bounces. You look at some of the percentages in terms of shooting and everything. I mean, it's been pretty lofty. But, you have to give credit to Barry Trotz. Why he's not getting more talk about Jack Adams, Coach of the Year type stuff is really perplexing, because the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons why this team's doing so well, is Alex Ovechkin's defense has improved light years from what it was last season. And no one's talking about it. I mean, for years people have been writing about and talking about how bad his defense is. And we're in a season now that it's been great, but it's been probably the most underreported stories of the NHL season.
Well, Marissa, what have you seen from this Capitals team that you think that has helped them go on this run?
Besides just luck, maybe?
Well, you make your own luck. Isn't that what the cliche is?
That's true. I mean, Ovechkin's been really good this year.
Yeah.
I mean, and to win, once you get on that streak where you win, 1 or 2 games, I feel like you get into this momentum where you have a rhythm. You have a rhythm with your team when everyone starts playing their part like a puzzle in a way where you can win 5, 6 in a row. Maybe it will be 7, 8, 9, 10. Forever, who knows? Don't ask Neil. Don't ask Neil.
Forever and ever.
I'm going to go on the under for forever on the win
You know why this is? Like, I don't cover Capitals, and so I have this optimism about these teams.
Got it. I've been in a lot of Game 7s where it's not ended the right way for the home teams.
I know, that's what it is.
Well, Dan, is it Holtby?
There's also a lot of secondary scoring they're getting that, I feel like for the last 17 years we've set up here talking about secondary scoring, where they can get secondary scoring from, blah, blah, blah. I think this year they were the first team in the NHL to have 6 guys getting to double digits for goals. Eric Ferris having a great season.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got guys scoring goals on the top 3 lines, and the Ovechkin's going to get his goals. That hasn't been a problem for him. But if you're going to get contributions from all these other guys, Johansson's still scoring.
They scored 5 goals one night. Backstrom and Ovechkin weren't even on the score sheet.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that's interesting. You mentioned that, Neil and Dan, about the goals. Let me read you a quote here from Braden Holtby from Alex Pruitt's story. It says, "We're playing a style of game that gives us a good chance to win games every night. We're not trying to outscore teams 5-4 or 6-5. We're trying to win those 2-1 games, those 3-2 games, the ones that translate into playoff games a lot easier." Is that something that you believe it's going to last,
No,
or is that just
that's
player
false.
speak to you?
No, you look at historically
Yeah.
teams that do well in one-goal games do not do well in the playoffs at all. You're much better off running up the score, having that type of skill that you can not only run up the score but also keep the opponent from scoring. But again, I mean, this team is probably the most deep and the most balanced we've seen in quite a long time.
Yeah.
Especially, you look at the blue line. Carlson should have been an all-star. Mike Green could conceivably be the most valuable player on this team. Matt Niskanen, great acquisition. On that right side, they have a ton of talent on the blue line. And you have guys like Carl Alsner, talk about secondary scoring. I mean, he's scoring goals, something that you haven't seen in a while.
Right.
And that was something that actually changed. Barry Trotz said, hey, you got to be involved in the play more. You have to change the way that you're playing. And it's been a total team buy-in. I mean, Barry Trotz has done an amazing job with this team top to bottom. There's not a single facet of this team that he hasn't had an impact on. And that's obviously contributing to winning. So, look, you got to ride the wave while it happens. This team is good.
Speaking of great coaches, we know that Urban Meyer certainly is one. He stamped it again with Ohio State. Now we have to look at what's going to happen next for these two teams. We'll start with Marcus Mariota. He hasn't made a decision yet. Presumably he's going to go to the NFL. If you have the number 1 pick overall, Dan, are you taking him?
No chance. 0 chance.
Because?
Well, I mean, probably recency bias a little bit watching him last night. But
yeah.
It just doesn't. I mean, he doesn't seem like Andrew Luck. Basically, Andrew Luck sits back there and makes those NFL throws, which he was doing at Stanford.
Yeah.
And we've just seen too many guys who came out of non-traditional offenses.
You're seeing read option guys like RG3, Colin Kaepernick.
Which doesn't mean that he couldn't be a good NFL quarterback or even a great NFL quarterback. But there's a difference between being an above-average NFL quarterback and being worthy of the number 1 overall pick. There's just been too many guys at the top of the draft, or guys who played in non-traditional offenses who did not seem NFL ready. And I don't see how you can take a guy that's a gamble at number 1 overall. I wouldn't do it.
Well, Marissa, this guy's the Heisman Trophy winner. Would you take him number 1?
It's kind of a jinx at this point, really, when you look at it. I mean, look at last year's Heisman Trophy winner, that came to the NFL.
Sure.
We have RG3, Heisman winner, came to the NFL.
Yep.
A lot of times, you're a good quarterback in college doesn't necessarily translate because you're not playing against these NFL-style defenses, which are totally different. So I wouldn't do it.
Neil, too risky to take Mariota number 1?
Way too risky. I mean, you have got to have a slam dunk number 1 pick workout each and every time. I mean, when you look at, Andrew Luck versus RG3 was a thing back before they were drafted, right? I mean, there was actually some talk that maybe you take RG3 number 1. We saw it once before, Ryan Leaf, Payne Manning.
I mean, right.
You have got to nail that number 1 pick. I do not think it's worth the risk. And we've seen too many of these dual threat quarterbacks come out, and there's maybe one type of offense, right, in Philadelphia that may work, but other than that, it's really.
And what? Mariota got hurt yesterday. He got banged up. He missed
did?
a couple of plays because he was running and whatever. I'm not going to say that you should never run, but that's just the kind of that risk. Look at these guys in the semifinals. Look at the 4 quarterbacks in the semifinals. Rodgers was a late first rounder.
Right.
Russell Wilson was a 3rd rounder. Tom Brady was a 6th rounder. I mean, you can find. Obviously, there's like some voodoo magic involved.
Because they don't have the flash, right? Because the Heisman is one with flash. It's that dual threat type.
It is.
Gaudy numbers, playing with people that are better than everybody else. But, when you get a fundamentally sound quarterback later on in the draft, it can really pan out.
Well, Marissa, I'm going to bring this back to the Redskins for a second. Let's just say that Mariota is available when they pick. What about that?
I mean,
No, what about that? I think it's so intriguing.
I think they wouldn't. I think it is intriguing. I think it'd be hard not to if for whatever reason he'd be the best available at that point.
Right.
But we just, I know it's scary to actually think
it
about
would be great
that.
for the Redskins if he was available because I think they could trade back that.
I was about to say, nothing in Scot McCloughan's pedigree suggests that he would make that pick. I can easily see them trading back. And that brings us back to the first point of rebuilding this team. You need picks.
Yeah, so if you're Scot McCloughan and he's available at 5, you would
go
in another direction.
I would talk to 31 NFL teams and see who was going to give me the most. For
Trade
that
back.
No Jameis Winston there either?
No way.
You're staying away, right? You don't want another quarterback?
He's going to be the biggest bust, I think, coming out of this draft, bar none.
I do think they will take a quarterback in the draft. It just won't be in the first round.
Well, we have many months to analyze this, and we will do so down the road. But thanks for being here. For Neil Greenberg, Marissa Payne, Dan Steinberg, I'm Gene Wang. Remember to follow us at Post Sports Live on Twitter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.